CBS 21 News presents Face the State with Joel D. Smith, a look at the issues and politics that shape Pennsylvania.
Good morning, friends, and welcome to Face the State for Sunday, December 11th. As the year is coming to an end, so is the time in office for Governor Wolf. In a sit-down interview, we are asking how he wants to be remembered, what were his biggest challenges, and what's next for him after 8 years in office. Our political insiders will react to that, but also they're talking about some big issues, including the prisoner exchange that brought Brittany Griner home. Now to our one-on-one interview, though, with Governor Tom Wolf. He has not been on this show, Face the State, since I started hosting back in March. I found him to be very open, honestly talking about any topic, but also very comfortable in his own skin. He can live with all the decisions he's made, but that doesn't mean he won't look back and wonder if some results could have been different. All right, here we are in a very comfy spot in front of the fireplace here, talking to Governor Wolf after nearly 8 years in office. Does it feel like a fast 8 years?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's been a privilege.
So what are you going to remember most? That's a big question, it seems like, but what comes to mind?
Well, I've always been interested in history and politics, and here I was at the center of history in a lot of different ways, and I've really appreciated being part of history. I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss it when I'm on the sidelines.
What do you hope the history books will say about you, your legacy?
Well, I think the three things, sort of three buckets. The first thing is honesty and integrity. I mean, the gift ban was the first thing I actually did, but we've done things like, you know, the competitive bidding for legal contracts and things like that. New things to actually make sure that we're doing things right. We have the fair funding formula in education. So that's the first thing, honesty, integrity. Second thing, I think we've made good investments to make lives better. I ran on education, recognizing the Commonwealth needed to step up and stop putting the burden of funding public education solely on the backs of local property taxpayers. And I think we've done a lot of good things in that way. Those are smart policies. We've expanded Medicaid, so have the lowest uninsured rate in Pennsylvania history. And then the final thing is competence. I think done all these things in a way that I'm leaving Pennsylvania. When I got here, we had $230,000 in the rainy day fund. We have $5 billion now. We had a $2 to $3 billion structural budget deficit each year. That has disappeared over time. We now have this budget actually is a $5.3 billion surplus budget, and we're actually exceeding that as of the end of November. So those are the three things I'm proudest of: being honest, having good policies that really help people, and actually doing it in a fiscally responsible way. So
with that, though, comes some things that you wish would have gone better, or let's even call them regrets. I don't know how you want to categorize them, but what comes into that bucket?
Well, I wouldn't say. I mean, I think Pennsylvania still has to do more. I think in the education sphere, I think we are doing a better job of fairly funding education. We need to do more to adequately fund education. We can't afford to leave somebody behind who might grow up to be, you know, a great doctor or somebody who will manufacture a product that we all want. And if we stiff somebody from that track for whatever reason, and education is a pretty good way to start that process, then we're hurting ourselves. So I think that's something that we still need to work on. So I put a record amount of money during the last 8 years into education, but I think, you know, there's still some work there. The other thing is I regret we haven't come up with a way for Pennsylvania to fund our infrastructure. We have roads and bridges. The federal government's been very generous in coming through, but Pennsylvania still has to come up with its share to fix and expand its road and bridge network.
Even with the most tax on gas and things like that?
We shouldn't be taxing our gasoline. We should drop that. Fossil fuels are not the future. Cars are becoming more fuel efficient, and the future probably is electric anyway, so that they're not going to be burning fossil fuels at all. So that's not a long-term strategy for funding anything. So we ought to get away from that and come up with something different. I almost don't care what it is, but it ought to be something that recognizes that we do have an obligation to fund the maintenance of our roads and bridges, and it's not going to be free.
Sometimes history has a way of taking care of itself when you happen to be in office when something big happens. Not much bigger than the pandemic.
Right.
Looking back on it now, where were some mistakes made, things that you wish you would have known a little bit more or changed faster, or maybe you think it went okay?
No, I think I'm going to be second guessing myself for the rest of my life, and I'm sure other people will be second guessing me, and I think everybody who was in a position of responsibility anywhere in the world during that time, that was something that was really new for everybody, and I don't see too many places that I would look back and say you handled it responsibly. But I think the thing that I can say is that whether I made mistakes or not, I tried to do the best. I wasn't playing politics. I wasn't trying to be politically expedient. I was trying to do what I thought was best for the health and welfare of the people of Pennsylvania. So if I made a mistake, I made it honestly.
Whether it was a mistake or not, the result for the kids is really unfortunate right now. When we look at the test results, just some new ones came out this week. As a whole, they're not good, and there's no easy solution to get it back. So where are we on that right now?
Yeah, well, and we also have a shortage of teachers.
Well, that's part of the result too.
Yeah. So yeah, the pandemic was hard on everybody, but it was particularly hard on our education, the kids. I think we learned that or had reaffirmed that in-class education really, we did a lot to try to have distance learning. It's not as good as actually being in the classroom with other kids learning together. And I think that was part of the issue. The other issue is I'm not sure what we could have done differently if you're faced with the choice of the health of your children and your teachers, and the educational quality. What a Hobson's choice that
well,
is.
When you were looking at it, because the state that we are, the Commonwealth has 500 school districts.
Yes.
There were so many different ways that they went about this, and it doesn't seem like there was significantly that difference of who got infected or how often. So looking back, some school districts stayed in almost the entire time after that first few months. Others never came back until it was completely almost over, so to speak. Should we have been smarter to look at which ones are back and how is it working for them and try to get everybody in that boat?
Yeah, well, first of all, we didn't know
those
what we know in hindsight. We know now that the younger kids were much more resistant to this disease than the older folks were. At the same time, teachers were not immune, and as you got to older teachers, they were less immune, and then in the period of uncertainty, no one knew exactly what. So you'd have some parents would say, yeah, I want my kids to go to school, but teachers saying, I don't want to go to this school.
Right.
You'd have some parents saying, I don't want my kids to go to school at all, or if they go, they got to wear masks. I mean, we were all over the place, and someone had to come in and say, okay, this is the way we ought to do it. And school districts, each trying to make up their own mind, we're faced with this really tough, no-win set of decisions.
Yeah. We are just getting going with our interview with the governor. It continues after this. We're finding out what the future holds for him after he officially leaves office. Is he really done with politics? So, what will Governor Wolf do next? I'm ready to give him a job offer. That's just part of what's happening now. In part 2 of our one-on-one exit interview with the governor, we're starting with a fact check. Do you know that you have the record for the most vetoes as a governor?
I think second to Milton Shap. I think he has to go back to Milton.
You know
Shap.
your stats on that one?
I don't know exactly something, but he's way ahead of me.
Either way, it does say something. And maybe it's the way our government's supposed to work. It's a split government at this point. How do you feel? Is that what's supposed to happen, or are we supposed to find more ways for both sides to get places?
I think if I had been one of the, I had sort of rolled over and said anything that comes to my desk is going to be law, that wouldn't have been right.
Right.
If I had just said I'm not going to say yes to anything, I'm just going to throw stones and have 8 years of, deadlock.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have been right either. So where we ended up was a place where I think I was right in selectively vetoing bills. I was steadfast in support of women's right to make their own health care decisions. I was steadfast in terms of what I think is responsible legislation in terms of gun ownership and safe gun ownership. So I don't have any regrets about that. I also think that if I had any of those vetoes overridden, that might have made me have second thought. None of them were overridden.
Good point. Yeah.
So I think you can't be all of one or the other. You can't roll over and say anything comes to my desk, I'll sign. You can't say anything comes to my desk, I'm going to veto. You got to figure out where the balance is, and I think we've done that. So you look at, yeah, I have a veto on a lot of bills. On the other hand, I've gotten a lot of good things done.
You mentioned if you would have been overridden by, if the veto was overridden, you may have reconsidered things. Well, in a different way, things did change by the power of the people with amendments and putting things on the ballot that way. Was that an effective way of seeing where the people really were?
It's a constitutional process. Now, I disagreed with the decision that the people made, but you know, that's the decision that was made, and so went with it. That was the only one. Now there are another set of
some are coming, right?
That are coming, but that's
we're talking about executive powers and how long they last. And,
yeah. The one that did pass was on limiting the disaster declaration.
Yeah. Why do you think that should still go on? I know we're not going to rehash the whole thing, but you know, you think it should be endless and be allowed to keep on going for as long as the executive feels necessary? No, and it ought to be longer than 21 days. Though I think that a real emergency, if you really have an emergency, it takes you longer than 21 days to mobilize the resources that you're going to mobilize. So, you know, somewhere in there ought to be some reasonable compromise. But I understand that was the feeling to sort of be draconian at the time, and while I disagreed, that was the decision of the voters. One of your other legacies may be decriminalizing drugs like marijuana and some of those pardons. We just got word that from the Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, 3,500 applications for the program, 2,000 were denied in hearings already. Only 200 were granted a hearing. Does this need to be revamped or revisited? It's not really accomplishing the big numbers.
I was just trying to bring in a much more just system. So while many people might have applied, there were standards that we all had to put into place to say, you know, these are the things that we expect, and if those criteria weren't met, then they didn't go through. So again, the process works through the pardons board, and they make their decision, and that comes to me. So I imagine, sounds like what they're talking about is the number of applications that were finally seen by the Board of Pardons.
Biggest surprise you had from being on the outside, being on the inside, being with that name, governor, before your name?
I think the biggest surprise was, you know, coming from an organization, private organization, business, where you had to make decisions, you had to sell people on ideas, convince people that what you were doing is right. The biggest surprise was how similar this was to that. This is not different from that. Here you have to convince people, use your persuasive powers. We didn't have as many employees in my private business as we have here, but you're trying to do the same thing, empower them to make decisions that actually make our constituents happy, their constituents and Pennsylvanians. So I guess the big surprise was how little different, how similar it was to what I faced before.
Did you already have thick skin, or did you have to really get used to that? Because I mean, you're a target for whoever's not happy in this state.
Yeah, I think that's a matter of thick skin. I think it's a matter of perspective. I think the hardest job I ever had was managing a True Value hardware store, and you know, when you're in retail, there are just some customers that they don't like the product you're selling, they don't like the price you're selling it at, or they don't like you. Mm-hmm. And in retail, they're eager to express that, or not shy about expressing that. And so I don't think it's a thick skin. It's just you sort of learn to say, okay, I'm a human being. You know, some people are going to say he's okay. Some people are going to say he's not. There's not much I can do about it.
Sounds like you have the right perspective on it, but will there still be some measure of relief when you know the next big problem that comes down the road is not going to be your problem?
Well, no, I mean, that was never a burden for me. I mean,
Okay.
it was in business, if somebody has an accident or in life, there are good and bad things that happen all the time. I think the thing that I'm going to miss is that this has been there's sort of an excitement about being at the heart of things, that you're not on the outside as a spectator, and I think I'll miss that. It's not relief I'll be feeling. I enjoyed being in the center. When I was in business, I enjoyed being at the center. When I was in the community, I was chair of most of the United
Sounds like
Way.
you're going to find things to keep you busy.
I don't think so. I think I've done all that.
Okay.
I think I'm looking forward to trying to make retirement work.
Okay. I heard a fun part of retirement is being a guest on Face the State occasionally, just to give your opinion. And this time, we don't even hold you to stuff. You just throw out opinions. It doesn't even matter anymore. That's what our guys do, at least.
I'm sure you could do much better.
Oh, well. We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And everything for Pennsylvania.
Thank you very much.
All right.